Getting to understand pivot tables a little more and experimenting, there is a new feature that has been added to pivot tables within Excel since 2013, and that is the recommended pivot table option. You would take your data as normal, just click within, go to Insert, and instead of choosing Pivot Table, assuming you know what you're doing, you would instead go through Recommended Pivot Tables to see what Excel can offer. Now, even if you know your way around pivot tables, this can still be a quick way of getting in to get yourself a pivot table summary. We choose the Recommended Pivot Tables option, and it then comes up with a variety of choices. Here on the left, you can see sum of total purchase YTD. That's been split by title, so Mr. and Ms. Sum of total purchase YTD based on the middle name. Strange option, but it's what it's gone for. Sum of total purchase YTD based on the state province. Pretty similar to the one we did in our sample, based on the day of the week that they were born. If you want to do some strange statistics, sum of customer ID, now that wouldn't be very useful, just adding the customer IDs up based on total purchase YTD. That starts to become a little stranger now. Sum of total children based on the country, sum of number of children at home, sum of number of cars owned based on their education, sum of age, and count of email address based on their occupation, count of email addresses based on their date of birth. So some of the lower ones perhaps are a little strange and would not be ones that you would ordinarily think of, but the ones near the top, perhaps not that one or that one, but certainly that one, are ones that you might want to consider. Now, should you like the look of one of the recommended ones, perhaps this one for example, you simply then click OK. Alternatively, if none of the recommended options here down this left-hand side suit you, you don't actually need to click cancel. You can just go blank pivot table, and that will be the same as going to insert and pivot table because the data is already selected. So you can look through these every time you create a pivot table, decide none are for you and go for blank pivot table, or decide actually I quite like that one and then OK, and that pivot table would then be generated for you. And there you can see the row labels are our region, and we can see here in the pivot table lists which ones have been chosen: state, province, name. That's what these are. Now notice they actually have a plus next to them which can be expanded, and that plus is into the email address, which would be a bit of a strange grouping because email addresses are unique to individuals. Potentially I would remove the email address, leaving me with address type, which we've got there as a grouping of home, and shipping. Again, perhaps the address type we don't need. Even though we've selected and gone with one of the recommended pivot tables, we can then still edit that pivot table by changing the rows or the columns, or even the mathematical calculation in the data section. We can see this recommended option in place on another working file, which is the sales data working file. Here's our data. We click anywhere within it, go to Insert, Recommended Pivot Tables. Now this is a smaller data set, and its recommendations are a lot easier to match what you might choose yourself. We have sum of sales by country, each country, and the total sales. Count of ID by country, so that effectively would be number of sales by each country. Sum of quantity, so number of items by each country. And we have a strange one, sum of sales by quantity. How much has been spent based on the number of items purchased? I suppose it's not that strange. Count of ID by quantity. So how many sales were made, physical purchases, based on the quantities. And that's the total of our recommended. You might actually go for the sum of sales by country. OK. And that pivot table is then created for you. Each of the country's unique values within the data, and then the sum of the sales, so of the sales column. There's our two columns in place, country and sales. You can see there with a smaller set of data, the recommended pivots actually get a lot closer to what you might choose yourself.